You're listening to ITDRC's Women in Tech series, where we talk industry pioneers, advice for getting to the next level, and the women out there doing it all. I'm your host, Hannah Ridings, and on this episode, we'll be talking to ITDRC's head of logistics, LN Lurie. Ellen has brought stability and empathy to our volunteers in the field. So if you're interested in a challenge, this is the episode for you. We'll be talking Logistics 101. So stay connected. You're listening to Women in Tech.
This month, we're joined by LN Lurie, a freelance consultant currently working with the Baltimore City Public Health on their vaccine and testing. She's been in logistics since 2015. And Ellen, everybody has a different introduction to tech, but I specifically really love your story. I feel like it could be a book. I will personally be waiting for that book or blog or podcast. But can you tell us, I know you were involved in something in gaming and you experienced burnout, which a lot of people on that side of the industry do. But can you give us a rundown of that story, short or long? I just love it either way.
Sure. Thanks. So yeah, I worked in the games industry and I worked for multiple companies. And how I got there is an entertaining story too. But I was in the games industry for about 9 years, 8 or 9 years, something like that. And, about 20 titles. And finally, by my 20th title, I was almost 30. I was actually at a Shiva, which is like a Jewish funeral, and for my grandpa. And somebody came up to me and they were like, "Hey, so what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I make video games." And they were like, "Well, what kind?" And I was like, "Oh, the kind that my cousin is addicted to." Um, and the one that he dropped out of med school, and he's brilliant. He could cure cancer, brilliant. And cancer is what took my grandpa. And so then that's when I started feeling like, you know what, I need to go into a different field, like something that makes me feel better about the world and myself and so on and so forth, instead of slaving away. Not that games is bad, because then I found out, let me fast forward a little bit. So I quit my job, like spoiler alert, I quit my job and then started traveling around the world. And in traveling, I learned that people learned English because of video games, which is super cool. But anyway, long story short, ended up in the Philippines, like just drinking rum, laying on a beach in a bikini, as you do. And then a typhoon came in, Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. And so, spoiler, I'm okay. Like, I'm alive. Everything's fine.
Right.
But
That's insane. Already a book. Yeah.
already a book. But yeah, so I stayed and I helped. And my qualifications were literally that I spoke English and I was strong. And I was female. That was kind of another key, because then I'm not intimidating and I'm not bossy, apparently, like according to this Filipino guy.
You sound like the perfect wife. You're strong. You're not bossy.
Yeah. And I was like, and I don't know, I mean, your audience doesn't necessarily know me, but if they did, they'd be like, wait, she's totally bossy. But whatever. So yeah, that's how it went. And I ended up staying in the Philippines for about 6 months, or sorry, 6 weeks, not months, 6 weeks, until my visa expired, and I was politely kicked out. But at the same time, I was done. I was tired, and I wanted to go home. And came home, and then that whole there's reverse culture shock, or there's yeah, like when you come back home after being in different parts of the world, it's completely shocking and overwhelming. But I decided then, in the Philippines, I was like, this is amazing, I feel alive, I need to do this forever. So I tried to find work in various places. I stumbled upon American Red Cross, but like a lot of the stuff they were having me do is call and ask for money, which I'm not good at that at all, just by the way. But then found my passion once I joined. And I needed to make money somehow. Like, I was still kind of traveling and not making money. So I became a wildland firefighter, because that's disaster response and it pays, which is key. And so I learned ICS, through that, and then also joined Team Rubicon and deployed with them a whole lot. Learned about ITDRC through Team Rubicon. And so that's how I got involved and all of this. So that was back in 2015 is when I started actually making money for doing disaster response.
I mean, that's everybody in this field, right? We're all like, where's the money? Show me the money. But that is insane to go through a typhoon in the Philippines and then say, I want to go to more disaster zones, you know? Like, how,
it's addictive, Hannah. It's really addictive.
what brings you back to a disaster zone? Because I when I tell people what I do, like, hey, I go to disaster zones, most people are like, why would you ever, like, why would you ever seek that out? Like, what was it for you that you were like, I'm going to do this now for a living?
Oh, well, wait. So people say, why would you ever do that? And then I would ask them, like, so why would you not? And I guess, like, I was interviewed, I think it was the New York Times, or maybe it was the Washington Post or somebody kind of high. And my dad caught it, like, because he reads all of that. But somebody interviewed me and they're like, wait, you were here on vacation and then you stayed and you helped? And I was like, yeah, what are you doing? You're just interviewing people. Like, I was very grumpy. I was cranky, tired, mosquito like bitten everywhere. But I'm like, why are you not helping? And there were actual tourists, like they came through the camp when we were trying to like make in the Philippines. Like there was all these white tourists, and I was like, get a bag, fill it with rice, get some water, put that in the bag. Like, what are you doing just standing here and looking at me? And I got really mad. But at the same time, like now I'm like, oh, this is just like a normal day in the Philippines for them, I guess. And for the interviewer, I don't blame them at all. Like that was her job. But I get kind of, I don't know what the alternative is. Like there are people that need your help, so go and help them. And if people like, I don't know what the alternative is. Do you want me to sit around and watch Desperate Housewives? Because that's not me. Like I don't know.
I can totally sympathize with your response to the reporter, though, because I came from that world, journalism. I used to be a journalist. I mean, and that's one of the main reasons you get burnt out. Like you're like, I can't be a reporter. I can't be in the this world anymore without helping people. Because I mean, there is the term disaster tourism, and that's how it kind of feels from the media point of view. When you're in that world, you think, it's hard if you have that kind of passion to like go and then immediately leave. So I definitely like understand like that side of it. But like, yeah, that's what got me out of that industry was I want to do more. So I totally get that. But there are a lot of people who just don't get it. But I mean, it attracts a certain type. But our topic this month is logistics, which I will admittedly say I have done so much Googling. Your job seems very complicated. You have to think about literally everybody in every scenario. So I'm kind of your perfect audience, and I would assume anybody else listening who isn't in your field, for a decade is a little rusty, is a little like, what is that? But if you're in a disaster zone, what's your rundown? What do you do?
It's I would like just to add on to like, why do you go back to disaster zones? The part is like, if you're good at something, you always want to perfect it, right? And so like with logistics, there is no perfection. Like there is no way that anybody's ever going to say, oh man, I ran that operation so perfectly. It was flawless. Like that never exists. But what you keep trying to do is like keep getting better at something, and keep putting like tips and tools and tricks in your hat or in your back pocket, so then when it comes up the next time. But the coolest part of logistics, the reason that I freaking love it is because it's so much problem solving and on the spot creative, like creative interactive problem solving constantly. Like from the moment you get up and you have to find coffee, well, how do you find coffee? And so let's just start there. And this is food unit leader. So there's 6 hats that logistics wears. And that's and I have a slide deck that will also show this. So it's facilities. So where are you going to sleep? Where are you going to work out of? Supply, where are you going to get your stuff? And then ground support, which is all your vehicles or transportation type things. The 4th is medical, which is medical not as like oh, this is a disaster, we need to help the people that are injured, but it's helping your people, so the responders, typically in ICS fashion. Food is the fifth hat. So how are we going to eat, which is the most important hat, by the way, because everybody remembers how they ate on a disaster, but nobody really remembers anything else. And then the sixth is commo, or communications. There can be a security thing depending on your situation, and that might fall under logistics, but I'm going to leave that off because we don't typically do that. But as far as like, okay, so you wake up in the morning, you're on a disaster zone, and you stretch, and hopefully you got a good night's sleep, but you need to find coffee. So like, where did you bring coffee? Do you have to source it from someplace? There's no Dunkin' Donuts open or Starbucks or anything, because it's a typhoon, or it's a tornado, or like a hurricane, which is super common for us. Um, and then even if you do have coffee, you have like the beans or the grounds, and you have water, but somehow you have to make it boil. You have to make it hot, and you have to like brew coffee. So how do you do that? Do you have fire? Like, do you have a coffee pot? Well, if you have a coffee pot, that's cool, but now do you have electricity? So then it just keeps getting a little bit more complicated, as I just talked about one thing, which is coffee. We haven't even talked about bathrooms yet. Like, so just coffee that's actually a really good example of logistics, of like all the things that you have to solve from from 0 to 10, or from A to B. Like, you have to think about the entire thing as a picture of how, like, how are you going to make a little camp for your people and supply them, and feed them. So that's the part that I like about logistics. And that is what logistics is if you ever go camping and you're the camp mom, then you would be great at logistics.
And our first responders love coffee. So that is like the perfect
Yes.
example. As you were
Yes.
explaining it, I was just picturing a caveman holding a coffee cup going, "Where's the fire?"
Yeah. Yeah,
But
basically.
like, I mean, it's so detailed, and every natural disaster is different. I know you have experience with wildfires and hurricanes. So how do you prepare differently for each of those events?
I personally don't. Like, my go bag is exactly the same. If I do logistics for music festivals. I do logistics for weddings. I do logistics for, like, I'm here doing COVID response. Like, my go bag is exactly the same regardless of that type of event. My clothes might change. I might have more bug spray or less, like that type of stuff. But overall, like, my kit is exactly the same. And I'll give you a thing so you can put it in the show notes or whatever, of like what is in my go bag. A lot of zip ties, a lot of Sharpies, a lot of blue tape, like, always. A lot of coffee and ways to make coffee. A tornado, a typhoon, any of those types of disasters, I've never done, nor do I have any interest in doing like man-made, like, war. Somebody was talking to me about it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, would you ever do like war or protest?" And I was like, "I have no interest, because I don't know what that would be like. I don't know, would my go bag instantly just, would I have to have a gas mask as well? Like, I don't know."
That's a
But
whole different set
but
of
for disaster,
trauma too. It's a whole different set of trauma,
yeah,
and it's a whole different set of scenarios. Like that's
yeah,
like way crazier.
yeah. Um so that's but basically it's all the same. Like, you have to think of, where are people going to sleep? Is it far? It has to be far away from, but not too far from the toilets, because what if they have to wake up in the middle of the night? But you don't want them smelling it, right? And also, like, porta potties, you don't want the door to slam like right outside your tent. That's kind of annoying. You don't want the porta potties to be too close to the food, because smell. Um, where are you going to eat? How are you going to feed them? What are you going to feed them? Do they have dietary restrictions? Again, like, you are essentially a camp mom, and but there's catches, I guess, but it doesn't, like, everything that I just described was for the for the music festival, and but at the same time, all of that plus, bears or fire, then all of a sudden now you're in a wildland fire. Um, all of that plus or all of that minus fires and bears and thinking about food scarcity, then you're in COVID. And so now, like that's a situation that we're in right now, where like everything's kind of open, but it's still a disaster. And things are scarce, or especially gas. I don't know if you guys were affected by the gas shortage, but we were here in Baltimore.
Thank goodness we weren't. There were a lot of people that were doing, panic buying,
Yes.
but it came on the news like, hey, quit doing that. Like, there's not a shortage here. And so it's balanced out. But, there are those people that instantly panic. I mean, gas, thinking about PPE now, like, there's a lot of factors going around just for even a disaster zone that's already complicated, or a music festival or whatever. Now you have to factor in social distancing for first responders and stuff like that. I mean, that's even crazier.
I'll add, like, I don't know if this is, well, I don't know a music festival that's gone on yet, but in addition to, like, in music festivals in just general, so yeah, social distancing, but also like, how is the ambulance going to get to the patient? Or how are you going to get the patient to the ambulance? So thinking of that transportation, like, can you drive an ambulance to the field or wherever, that the people are? Or are you going to carry them out? Or are you going to go-kart, or golf cart them out? So like those are lots of logistical pieces.
The description of that alone gives me anxiety for your job. I would be the absolute wrong person for this, but it's so fascinating that like you are able to think of all those facets. But I do have a question.
Yeah.
When I'll get into a different deployment and stuff like that, but is it different state to state, and is it different from US versus other countries?
Ooh, that's a good question. There are certain things that are different state to state. Um, the big thing when I was part of Team Rubicon, they are paid in high fives, hugs, and beer. So it was crucial for a logs person. Like, you always had to have beer at the end of the night, or beverage. Sorry, you had to have beverage, but some of it is alcoholic beverage. Well, certain states don't sell alcohol past a certain hour or on certain days, or even in that county. So then you had to think of that, like, where am I going to get beer? And some, like in Cook County, they didn't, for whatever reason, it was actually, the operation was called Dry Tears when they were up there, because it was a dry county. And it wasn't Cook County, it was the one next door. But
oh, that's tragic.
It is. And it's like, crap, how do you get beer? Well, you had to go over county lines. So that's different, and that varies. Typically, especially during COVID, every time, because I was setting up field hospitals all over the country, and they were scarce for a while. It was, okay, what are the rules in your state? Like, how and where do I buy alcohol? Or how and like, what are your mask rules? Because that varied from state to state. Like, what are any strange rules that like people typically ask you when you pick them up from the airport? Like, and now of course I'm blanking, but curfews, that was a big one. Actually, the last time I was in Fort Worth was during the protest things. And then there was this curfew because of the Black Lives Matter protests. And it's like, oh, don't be out past whatever the time was, 9 o'clock, I guess. So that's good to know. Like then that puts a damper in your plans, especially if you had like a delivery. Let's say that you have a delivery, like a set package that's going to deliver past curfew or on Sunday, but nothing's open or whatever. Then you have to put that in your, and I'm not saying that I'm a master at any of this. It's just like, oh, that happened. Okay, what's our plan B and C and D? So, but internationally, then you come into customs and like importing, exporting. Thankfully, ITDRC's only done one international op, and it might be our last. I'm not sure. We still have stuff that's in the Bahamas. That was 2019, and we still have stuff that's there. So
Dorian is something I actually wanted to hit on. It's a ITDRC deployment that happened in 2019. And for anybody that, isn't watching the news or isn't up on every single hurricane, Hurricane Dorian was an extremely powerful and devastating Category 5 Atlantic hurricane. which became the most intense tropical storm on record to strike the Bahamas. It's also regarded as one of the worst natural disasters in the country's recorded history.
I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, winds peaked at 185 miles per hour, and the storm left 70,000 people homeless, many of whom are still rebuilding. And like you mentioned, it was incredibly difficult for people who were supplying aid to get stuff there. So I would like to talk about Dorian because you were on the ground for that. First thing, boots on the ground. You're in a different country. What's step one there? What were some of the unique problems that came with Dorian?
So we had people on 3 different islands, and I'm gonna you caught me off guard because now I have to like remember the island names. But there was Grand Bahama, Nassau, which was the main island, and that might just be the capital. And see, now I'm screwing myself up. But so there was Grand Bahama, Nassau, and Abaco, or there were 3. We'll just say there were 3 islands. One was totally, absolutely destroyed. Like all there's left is mud. That was Abaco. The other one, I believe it's Grand Bahamas or Rock something, is the city that we were mostly working out of. And they, there were still some structures, but it was crushed. And many people went there. Like many organizations went there. So International Medical Corps, Team Rubicon, us, American Red Cross, of course, World Central Kitchen. So the first thing is, where are our people and what do they need? So what do they have and then what do they need? So we had people again on 3 different islands, Abaco, Grand Bahama, and our island on the main island, which is the capital was Nassau. And nothing was really bad or damaged in the main island, but it was like the place where everybody flew in. So people flew in there and then they went on like little puddle jumpers to the other islands. Okay, great. What do they have? Do they have, are they able to sleep somewhere? If not, can we get them tents? Or can we get like any disaster? I'm like, can we get them a hotel? Can we get them an Airbnb? Are they going to be sleeping in their cars? Like what's the sleeping arrangement? The second is food. So you think kind of like has Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the first step is like oxygen, and then the second is like water, and water was a big one too. Like, can we get potable water? Where are they going to sleep? How are they going to feel safe? Because that is like the most important part for any disaster, whether it's international, but especially international, and then domestic. And then the other things is like the stuff that they need. Now, because we're ITDRC, we do a lot of IT stuff. So getting them IT stuff is difficult because it's not like we can just go down to the Home Depot. There's no Home Depot, and get stuff. We have to bring it in from donors from literally around the world. But a lot of it was shipped to Texas, and then from Texas to Florida, and then Florida to the Bahamas. So like that supply chain is slower than, I don't know, I put Band-Aids on people. And so you just have to go down to the store and get a box of Band-Aids. So what we do, because it's tech based, that's challenging. That's slightly challenging. But first things first, like making sure that the volunteers have what they need to just feel safe, like to feel like people. Do they have a place to shower? That was another big thing, like because the Bahamas is hot and gross.
This shows why you are in charge of logistics for ITDRC, because I mean, you quite literally think of everything. For someone who's getting into logistics, how do you stay organized? Do you have a suggestion for someone who's like thinking about all these things? How do you stay organized, especially when something seems so unorganized?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked this. So when you join ITDRC and you become a loggy, and you meet me and you're deployed as a logistician or whatever, then you get checklists. That makes your life so much easier. Just follow the checklist. And it's taken years and years and years. They're not perfect checklists. Things are going to get screwed up, but volunteers for the most part, and anybody who deploys in reality, like they never ever ever screw up food. Like that's the first thing. If you screw up food, you are just going to fail. But if you don't screw up food, then everything else is pretty okay because they know we're in a disaster zone. It's not, it's not the Hilton. We're not going to a sandals resort. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. But everybody is just working, like doing the best that they can. And it's taken me years to like figure this out because I'm my worst critic. I think everybody is their own worst critics, but just do what you can, do the best that you can, and make sure that your people are fed and fed well. And really the key is food, because again, I challenge anybody to this. Like if you say, hey, I went on vacation to XYZ and I remember all of this stuff, but I don't remember the food at all. That I have yet to meet a single person that has said that. I think everybody always thinks about food. Always.
Especially when you're working that hard, it's kind of like your time is measured on meals. At least I feel that way when I'm in a disaster zone. You're not looking at the clock. Sometimes, your phone's going in and out, or like me, my face is pressed up against a camera. So I literally measure the day with the meals. And I know with firefighters, that 4 a.m. breakfast in a wildfire is like so important, and they're sent out with X amount of calories in a lunch sack because they got to carry at least like a 1,000 calories or something like that with them because of like all the energy they're exerting. And techs, they carry equipment, so you're going to eat more when you're lifting and climbing and scaling roofs and doing all these things. And with a climate like Dorian, yeah, I'm sure water is like a big deal. Same when we go to hurricanes in Louisiana. I mean, that humidity is intense. And if people aren't getting their nutrition, they're going to drop. The heat's going to get to them. So yeah, those meals are extra important. I know you have some slides. Is there any information that we haven't hit yet?
No, I'm looking through them and I was like, no, all of this. And there are some like famous quotes out there of, uh, you know, that if you don't have a good logistician, then you're going to lose the war. And I'm screwing up that quote terribly, but basically, if you don't have bullets, there's no way you're going to win the war. And how do you get bullets? You get them from supply. And whose supply? That's logistics.
That is brilliant. That is so brilliant because I mean, you just think of the object. You don't think about where it comes from, and that's a lot of what happens in disaster zones, right? Like, so whenever I explain to people like, "Oh, I'm being deployed," they don't think about why I want to have like a really good big meal before I leave, because I'm like, McDonald's is like the roach. They always survive disasters, but everything else is wiped out. Like you have to like mentally prepare and to like know someone's handling logistics and like you aren't going to be fed like slop. It really does. It changes it. It changes it for the people that are supplying aid and stuff like that. I would like to hit on Hurricane Laura. That is where you and I first met.
Because McDonald's is not the roach. I would say Waffle House is because they have their own fun fact. Waffle House has their own disaster response team, and FEMA actually has a Waffle House index. Do you know this? Do you know about this?
I did not know this, but all their waffles, look at them. They're doing stuff.
No, this is amazing. So FEMA, like, they were sitting around and probably at a Waffle House, and they said, "Huh, this Waffle House has like a limited menu." And then they started going from Waffle House to Waffle House, like after some hurricane, and they got to a certain point, and they were like, "Oh, this part isn't hit so bad by the hurricane, and their Waffle House has a full menu. But then they went further, like to the sea, like to the epicenter of the storm, and then that's when the more limited the menu was. So it's called the Waffle House in like certain places that you hear about. So like Mexico City, Florida, when it was hit after Hurricane Michael, because that whole place was obliterated. So like certain cities might be obliterated, those Waffle Houses will be closed. But then as you go out, then they might have limited menus and then full menus. But that based on the Waffle Houses, you can tell like where is the damage of the storm. That's the Waffle House Index. So then you think of the logistics, like, and they know this because this is their business and it's a privately owned company. So like, how are they getting their eggs? What are they using? Are they using like real eggs or are they using the liquid eggs? Which in those cases, they're using liquid eggs. And their limited menu is just like frozen waffles and liquid eggs and coffee. And like, that's it. And so, but still, it's like, okay, they have this disaster like van that just comes and that has a whole bunch of supplies on it that can get them through just that. But it's pretty like Walmart or Waffle House is pretty stellar. Walmart does kind of the same thing for their supplies. So the two things that always sell out before a hurricane is, do you have any guesses?
Oh, I would guess gasoline, but I'm not sure if Walmart has their own gas.
No.
And beer. I'm
Yeah,
thinking
so
of
beer and Pop-Tarts. Like those are the two things that sell out immediately during, when a hurricane's
a
coming.
great breakfast.
It
Yeah.
is. It's the breakfast of champions, man. But they will stage vehicles or they'll stage semi trucks full of supplies like outside of hurricane land. As soon as a hurricane hits, then they send those semis in to restock the store because they know that people are panic buying, but also because the community is going to need stuff. So again, like where do you stage your stuff and where is the stuff coming from and do you have enough of it and is the supply chain okay? Blah blah blah. So anyway, yeah, let's talk about Laura.
Well, you know what? I've never been to a Waffle House. Like I've never been to a Waffle House. And secondly,
Oh,
I don't know how they would have an extended menu. Like it's just like waffles with strawberries, extra
okay.
syrup. Like I don't know how they have an extended menu. But now I feel like I need to go and check out a Waffle House in support of the disaster community because I have never stepped foot in a Waffle House. And I went to college.
Yeah, no, you totally need to go to a Waffle House or what. They also have amazing hash browns. I love their hash browns. I love their pecan waffles. They have apple butter. Like it's I'm a big fan. Their
Well,
omelets are huge.
that's quite an endorsement, and now I feel like they need to sponsor ITDRC or send us some kind of waffle donation. But yeah, Laura. So Laura had a lot of specific problems, and I remember rolling up on you, and you were cutting some wires or MacGyvering something for the sleeping situation, and I thought that was hilarious, but I guess you probably encounter,
So
things like that where like we got to solve a problem and this is what we have and this is logistics.
I mean, I feel so that was weird. I've never done that before. Joe and I kind of go back and forth of like, is this logistics? I mean, technically yes, because it's not anybody else's job, I guess. Like we're not going to ask a tech, a tech who has skills of like actually doing web admin to figure out how to like power up a generator. But at the same time, I have curly hair for a reason, and that's because I've had bad issues with electricity. And like I have had bad luck, and it all stemmed when I was like 3 and I stuck a bobby pin in the electrical socket. Like I've had bad luck with electricity. But
Oh man,
um
don't make me grab a fork. I've always wanted curly hair.
um but like Hannah, if you were asked like, hey, here's Google, like you have Google and you have this problem, figure it out. Like if you that is not you, then you are not like, you should not do logs. But if you're like, cool, I love me a challenge and I want to help, I want to figure this out, like I will problem solve everything. And it took me, I mean, I think it took me 3 days, to be fair. Maybe it was only 2, but it was still like, okay, there's a lot of aspects to this. And it was, so what we had was a giant generator, but we didn't have a way, it wasn't just a generator where you plug something in. It was, we had to hardwire things because we didn't have the adapter. The adapters was stupid expensive, like $200. But if you just hardwired it, like, stripping the wires of this and then doing that to the generator and then running the cable that's shielded, hopefully, to the bunkhouse that was donated by Mission on Wheels, then all of a sudden we could have air conditioning, and the air conditioning was fabulous. P.S. Once all of that happened, it was stellar. But we had to figure out, how are you going to power the air conditioning? That takes a lot of power. So then you have to get power from this generator, which runs on gas, to there. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, you use metal, because that's what we do. So how do you get, what kind of metal? Well, what gauge of metal? What kind, there's all these questions that you just don't know. And in reality, I asked a lot of people. I asked Joe a lot of questions. I asked Google a lot of questions, and I asked Home Depot a lot of questions. And eventually we figured it out. I should say that I think Joe pretty much figured it out. He just told me what to do, and then I did it. but I definitely learned a lot about how to hook up power. Should that be more of a logs thing? Yes, absolutely. Is it something that I need to investigate more and create curriculum? Probably. Is it something that I see every day on deployment? Never. That's the only time. Usually you call Sunbelt and you have them hook it up, and or United Rentals or somebody else. But we didn't have that option here. So
I'm so impressed, and your hair didn't get curlier. So
obviously, are you kidding? That's a lie.
Everything went well.
That's a lie. The humidity made my hair curlier, and you got an amazing picture. That's my favorite picture of myself. Yeah, you took that picture. So
you were going to work, and I thought that was great. But yeah, that is a funny memory and picture. But yeah, it's just problems like that. Like, you have your checklist, but I'm sure that wasn't on the checklist. So it's just kind of always being prepared and being prepared for the unknown, and things like that. But if you were new to logistics and you were going into a disaster zone, what would be your advice for that newbie stepping into an arena that big and that unknown?
So hopefully you have a mentor, or hopefully you have somebody that's, that is an experienced loggy. I would hate, and I've never had this experience. I was trying to think of like any type, and I never did. There was always somebody that I could ask, like, hey, what should we be doing? Or can we do this instead? Or, something like that. Somebody to bounce ideas off of. But I'm sure that you, Hannah, and probably many of our people in our audience, like, planned a birthday party for a 5-year-old. That's always where I go whenever I teach anything about logs. What is everything that you need for a birthday party with a 5-year-old? And then I'll start throwing injects in, so that, they go through like, oh, we need cake. Okay, now you have a gluten-free kid. Okay, now we need different cake. Okay, so then you need balloons. Well, you have somebody who's allergic to latex. Okay, so now we need different balloons, or maybe we have mylar balloons, or maybe we don't do balloons at all. Maybe we do streamers instead. Oh, but now it's going to rain, so all your party stuff outside needs to be inside or whatever. So that's basically ICS, and that is a disaster. Like, if you plan a party for a 5-year-old, that is as disastrous as it could get. Like, if you can do that, then you could probably do anything. But it's really just thinking of, where is the location? So that's facilities. Where is your stuff? What is any kind of parking, anything about vehicles? How are you transporting people? That's ground support, or just transportation in general. Is there enough parking? Like, that was a problem at my brother's wedding. Like, so we had to rent a parking lot someplace. What is your medical plan? So if people get sick, now with COVID, this has now become kind of excessive. Like, do we have enough hand sanitizer? Are we 6 feet away? Are we spaced out? Blah, blah, blah. How are you feeding people? So that's, again, the food hat. So like when you plan this birthday party or when you're doing all these plans, and then how are we communicating? Do we have enough? Do we need radios? Do we have each other's cell phone numbers? Cell phones has made this so much easier. But really that's it. Like those 6 things is, and I say that's it, and I know that like your head's kind of spinning. But again, hopefully if you're going in brand new, you're only given one thing. So when I went in brand new, I was given food. Like, Ellen, plan a menu for the next 3 days, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And lunch was easy because they just bag lunched, but like plan a hot breakfast and a hot dinner and get enough supplies for bag lunches during the day. And they gave me a shopping list and they gave me a checklist, and it was fine, and a credit card to like make all these orders and stuff. And that was my job. So like plan a menu for the next 3 days, always adding a day. Like the next day I would plan the next, couple days or whatever. And it was totally like, it was overwhelming. It was definitely like, that's how you start. And then the next time that you deploy, then maybe you're just doing, I don't know, like you're doing food and maybe a little bit of supply. So when you go out and buy food, but you're also buying like, oh, we need some duct tape. Oh, we need, paper towels, or, oh, we need some lunch bags, or I don't know, whatever. Right. So like general supplies.
Just take one step at a time, like take
Yeah.
one category, master that category, and then the next time you're going to take on 2 categories. I feel like that's such a great way to gain experience without getting burned out or overwhelmed.
Yes.
So I hope that's something that our volunteers can now realize, that you won't just be completely thrown in to being in charge of every single category, parking, communication, food, stuff
No.
like that.
And in ITDRC, our ops are really small. Like our like max, I think in the Bahamas we had, or I think in Puerto Rico we had the max number, which was 15 volunteers. So when you're feeding, and everybody has a credit card, and so maybe they'll feed themselves, and maybe that's your plan. Like, hey, go forth, feed yourselves. Like, in COVID, because again, things aren't really closed down, but we're not, it's called mustering, but we're all like rallying to one point, like to a FOB and a forward operating base. So then you don't have to think of like, I'm going to have a grill and I'm going to cook for 100 people. Like that is so overwhelming. But if you just say, hey, I have like 8 volunteers that I have to feed tonight. Okay, that's like, get a bunch of pizzas or get spaghetti, or do something like do you can have, and you can even delegate it. You can say, you know what, I am a lousy cook, I'm going to order out, or I'm going to pass this on to somebody else. But as far as vehicles, usually, like, again, we have like maybe 8 people, maybe they're not all in the same place, maybe they're not all in the same hotel. In ITDRC, really, like our lodging, so our facilities is usually a hotel. Maybe we'll have a central base. Maybe it'll be one of our Winnebagos, like our RVs. It's not a Winnebago, sorry. It's a giant, huge RV, our MTUs. But our big blue bus, and then so it just, but really parking, it's not like you're doing hundreds of people. Like it's not like you have to come up with a plan for hundreds. It's a really small mini party. The biggest headache in ITDRC is supply. And it's really like, it's like, we need to set up the school with all of this tech stuff that I don't really understand. So we need, and then they'll spew out a whole bunch of acronyms and letters. And so like it takes on all these different terms, like what is interchangeable. So like a USB, number 2 is not the same as a USB-C, for example, but like this power inverter isn't interchangeable with this one, but this one is totally fine, and da 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 da. So there's little tricks. So that's the part that I currently struggle with, but maybe other people wouldn't. So I guess for ITDRC, like if you wanted to get into disaster logistics, I would also say that ITDRC is a step, because our operations are so small, or as far as people, it makes us more nimble.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, that's what I tell techs too. Like, if you want to gain some experience, like this is where you can do it. I mean, there's so much opportunity, and there's also, I'm sure you can't gain experience remotely in logistics, but as a tech, you can do remote work and gain experience that way. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always room for everybody at any level. So, I mean, whatever level you're at now, you'll only grow. I mean, the people around, like, obviously you're in charge of our logistics. You're not going to hold anybody back. You're not going to, like, you're there to mentor and stuff like that, and kind of be a guiding light to anybody else that's in logistics or something like that. So it's definitely a great place to jump in. And also, if you have a passion for helping people, I mean, talk about a great experience. I mean, but that's a lot of what logistics is anyway. It's having empathy for people and the experience they're going to have, and helping. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're so lucky to have you in the org and as a member of the ITDRC family. And if you're interested in logistics, and if you're interested in finding out more, volunteer. There's always opportunities to serve. Do you have any parting words?
No, I would say that there's a couple really good opportunities if you wanted to work remote, if you never want to go out in the field, but you still want to do logistics work. There is stuff for you. And it's not glamorous by any means, but it is absolutely necessary. But we do have things called like Operation Repo, which is where we go and we politely ask for our stuff back, like if it's not being used anymore, so it can be used for other other communities and whatever. And so we do have things like that, or logs resets and taking inventory digitally and so on and so forth. But yeah, if anybody has any questions or if they want to get more involved, then absolutely hit me up. So yeah, that's it. I love logs. And there is a joke that logs is easy. And if you do become a loggy, I will let you in on the joke. And it is a joke because anybody who says it, it's the initials are LIE. So don't believe the lie, because logs is never easy. Like, it's not easy, but it is very satisfying.
I would never call that easy. Even being responsible for a family meal is like a full-time job. It's a challenge, and like you said, if you're up for a challenge, you're a loggy. So if you're in for a challenge, volunteer with the org. Ellen, thank you again. I hope we can do a follow-up. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah.